You know, this is the cleanest and nicest police car I've ever been in my life. This thing's nicer than my apartment.
Computer, I want you to shut down all the lens flare generators.
Lens flare generators deactivated.
Fascinating.
That's better.
I was unaware that we had that.
It's nice, right? I mean, who designs a starship where lights shine right in your eyes from virtually every angle?
Sweet and low?
No. This is not sweet and low. This is equal. Blue packet. Sweet and low is pink. See? Equal blue, sweet and low pink. Not...
Darth Vader, only you could be so bold. The Imperial Senate will not sit still for this. When they hear you've attacked a diplomat...
I know you have been inconvenienced, and I'm prepared to compensate you. Shall we say 1 million American dollars? Very well then, 2 million.
Ha ha.
Ha, ho, he.
Ha, he.
Hi. He, Mark.
They. He, Tom.
We,
He, Mark.
Cinemaniacs.
Whatever. Cinemaniacs. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah.
Cinemaniacs.
See what happens when we don't rehearse?
Yeah.
See, this is completely off the cuff.
Yeah, and as you can see, my cuffs are completely off. So, we are here once again to talk to those people about the films that we watched over the weekend.
That's very true.
And
but first,
yes,
I would like to welcome our new sponsor, the Latches Theater in Brattleboro. Wonderful. I think it's like a 5-plex now, but their main theater, for those of you who are local to Keene, New Hampshire, and haven't been to the Latches in Brattleboro, they're in downtown Brattleboro. I equate it to the Colonial. I mean, it's very old style, very regal and everything like that.
it is a gorgeous, dare I say, movie palace.
Yes, you
in
could
the
say
main
that.
theater. With lovely Greek-type architecture and a sky field painted on the ceiling. It's amazing. It takes you to another world when you go into that main theater.
So I want to thank Darren Goldsmith and the owner of the Latches. I'll find out who that is later. But I want to thank the Latches in Brattleboro for becoming our new sponsor. And not that I'm encouraging everybody to go out there, but that's where I like to go to see movies these days.
Would that be where if you had the choice of where to go to see films?
Absolutely. Any chance, I'll go see it at the Latches.
Wonderful.
There we go.
Speaking of films, shall we? First up, we have a new film from director Guy Ritchie, whose Snatch you may be fond of. Sorry. Tells the tale of the sword and the lady in some lake with a rock and a big scimitar and things. And it is entitled, it's legendary, King Arthur, the Legend of the Sword. I wish I didn't laugh when I said that. So, rock and roll King Arthur.
If you didn't get your fill of glowing swords from last December or coming up next December with Star Wars, you can watch this one, I guess.
Yeah, so this is Guy Ritchie's take on the Arthurian legend, of which I am familiar with through cartoons and films of my youth, so I can't say that it is fresh at my mind.
Like who isn't? Really?
So there are moments where I'm like, oh, this is really, they're kind of grounding this in reality, and then there's a giant snake, so maybe they're not, is it in the book? I don't know. So basically, I thought this was kind of silly.
Okay.
I thought the trailer looked kind of bad, and then I sat down for the movie, and it's like, I'm here, I need to watch this, I hope it's good. And the whole take and approach to this is very Guy Ritchie.
Yes.
If you had joked after Snatch and Lock, Stock came out, knowing what his style was at that point, oh yeah, they're giving him a King Arthur movie, and it's going to be like this. This is the movie that you would have been joking about, where King Arthur is, Moses-like, his family is in ruins, and he's put in a basket and sent up the river, if you will, and is saved and taken into, Cockney London, but with Londonium or whatever it was called in that era. So he's raised as a street punk, a geezer. He's a little bit wool, he's a little bit wild. He's like a tough guy, punk basically, gangster type guy. I think he runs a whorehouse or something in the movie. And then all of his friends are like that. And of course, there's kung fu in it. Not that you can really see what's going on. So the Knights of the Round Table ultimately are a bunch of Cockney street toughs out of a Guy Ritchie movie. And that didn't really jive for me. Like the winky tough guy thing, the King Arthur who looked like he just left a hipster barbershop on his way to the tattoo parlor. There were elements that were well done. I saw this in 3D because I had no choice. I usually prefer to see things in 3D if I can, but in this case, it was just the way I had to see it. And to me, I haven't looked it up. I believe it's a post-conversion 3D job. 3D does not work in a normally shot and edited film. Your eye is not allowed to focus on anything long enough for you to perceive the 3D. It's pointless. It's a waste of money. So there were moments in this film where they were obviously playing to the 3D, like they knew they were going to convert it. And there were moments where the 3D sold depth or height pretty well. But during some of the action scenes, which I thought were pretty badly executed and hard to watch, I was counting in my head, and no shot was longer than like a second. You can't perceive 3D that quickly, so there's no point.
Or at least appreciate it.
Or appreciate it.
Yeah.
Maybe if you freeze the frame and be like, wow, yeah, they did artificially mold that to look like it. There's depth there. So there's that. The action I thought was really sloppy, so I couldn't get anything out of that. It was all, kind of half-assed. There is martial arts in the film, because of course there is, but not done by Asians. That would be ridiculous. It has to be done by British people, by honkies. The martial arts were so sloppily conveyed, it's just like, well, I guess there's some food going on here. There were good moments. Some of the CGI was interesting. Some of the creatures, there were some effects that were kind of interesting.
I guess.
But it was there was too much style for me.
Yeah.
Like there's this moment where Arthur goes through this big trial or something, and the image just looked crappy. It just looked really bad. It was some kind of enhancement. It almost looks like it's hard to describe, but it looked crappy. And then there's a moment at the end where he's fighting, and it's his big moment, and the camera is doing like a 360 around him, and it's slow-mo, and it's fast-mo, and all that, and it looked like a cheap video game. It looked really bad. And all this stuff is going on, and I'm like, could you just calm down and just show me what's going on? So I thought Jude Law was not bad as the villain in the film.
Okay.
He has a certain magical way of getting his way in this film. There's a certain thing he has to do which is unpleasant, and you see him do it early in the film, and then there's a moment again later in the film where you realize he's going to have to do it again, and to see the torture in him is well conveyed in that moment.
Right.
I thought that was one of the moments that I liked in the movie, where it's like you're sitting there as an audience member going, ooh, yeah, this guy is so soulless that he has to do this, which he does not want to do in order to continue to rule. It sort of sets it up for a sequel. I don't know that I would want to see a sequel unless it was made by somebody who could calm the hell down with their camera work and editing. But overall, I think this is probably, I don't know who this movie is for. For people who like movies like 300, where it's just a lot of masculinity and tough guy and things blowing up and things, and maybe for the ladies who make goo-goo eyes at the guy, but I thought it was kind of boring myself.
Yeah, I thought I was left with ultimately, and I don't, when you say Guy Ritchie, it gives me a bad taste in my mouth, but I've liked a couple of his films, very select stuff. But yeah, I thought I went away, and I saw this after seeing something else that I really hated this weekend, so I probably like this a little bit more than I should. Not that I like it, but I didn't dislike it as much as you did. The fight scenes were almost unintelligible. You're right. I'm going to, and I guess what I can kind of appreciate, to try to say something good about this, was the attempt to modernize or sort of replace the Arthurian legend, but as you say, street toughs and that kind of thing, it just didn't gel. It felt really forced, and ultimately what I was left with was, and you said it exactly, it's just style over content and substance. This is all, I think, who's this made for? Are there real Guy Ritchie fans out there? I think
there probably are.
might appreciate that. But otherwise, I was ultimately pretty disappointed in King Arthur. Sorry.
There was like an overabundance of testosterone in this film.
Yes.
There was another film that came out this weekend which was awash with
you have to kind of balance it, hopefully.
Estrogen, shall we say.
You could say that.
That almost sounds gruesome. I did not see it, but I believe you did, and you may have referenced it a moment ago.
Well, it's possible. Amy Schumer is a hard-working lady who is just unappreciated, and she gets fired from her job. But by golly, she and her boyfriend are going to take this big trip that they've been planning for years and years. Unfortunately, he decides that he's going to break up with her, and it's a non-refundable trip. So what's she going to do? Nobody wants to go with her. I can't imagine why nobody would want to go on a trip with Amy Schumer. But she's able to get her mom to go ahead with her, and Goldie Hawn. So Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn decide to take an all-expenses-paid trip by Schumer to South America. But you better be careful if you're American women, particularly blondes, because you stand out down in South America, because with all the drug cartels going on around there, you run a really high risk. Risk. I'll say it again, risk of getting snatched.
Here's a choice of food and drink to satisfy anyone and everyone.
Yes, no, not at all. So anyway, went to see this. I was one of two males in the audience. So it was like
You were the one who was there voluntarily.
right. Well, the other one was 8 years old and got dragged along. He got to see Amy Schumer's breast. He got to hear a lot of F words and things like that. So parenting, I don't know what's really going on these days. But in any event, it was about 3/4 full. Again, vast majority of women. And I have to say, and I think it's our job to review these things on many levels. And I think one of our responsibilities is to address the target audience. And I think
totally.
the target audience was that audience, all of these women, and they just seemed to have a really good time. They found a lot of it. And what I was left with was I didn't laugh once. Not because it was women. I don't like Amy Schumer, but I love Goldie Hawn. And so I was really hoping that Goldie would raise the bar for me a little bit. And that didn't happen. This was all crude jokes. They make jokes about whale sperm and people drinking that and, breasts falling out and everything like that. That's the level of it. And so... And unquestionably, we're going to talk. We may have talked about already. I'm not sure, but The Hangover. It's all. I've seen the exact same thing on guys doing it, and it's no funnier there. But when I look for anything with these movies, whether it's about guys doing it or two women doing this, is something clever, something either that I haven't seen before, or that isn't just lowbrow guttural humor. And that seems to be Schumer's strength. Sorry for you fans out there if you really like her, but that's really what this brought, was a very visceral, lowbrow attempt at humor that I didn't find clever at all. Unfortunately, these two 30-ish maybe women came in right at the movie started, and they said, is there anybody sitting next to you? I say, no, please, have a seat. And I feel sure that they wanted to laugh more because something that the rest of the audience was breaking up about, I just sat there and I'm like, really? I don't think that's funny. And I know they wanted to laugh, so I apologize if you knew who I was and I ruined the movie for you. But I just thought Snatch was really disappointing.
I did not see it.
Okay.
I didn't want to see it.
Right.
It's not why I didn't see it.
Right.
Timing didn't work out. But what you said was something I always tell people when we talk about me doing this program, and it is, there's my opinion of it, but that's just what I think about it.
Right.
I want to say, if I'm surrounded by people who are laughing at a comedy that I hated, apparently it's a successful comedy that I didn't like.
And it's connecting with an audience and they enjoyed it. And that's all I could say was I'm really glad they enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Maybe we see everything. And so I think tough to come up with something that we haven't seen before. Does the average audience go out and see everything? I think probably not. So this may have been new and unique to them. And I think that's one of the things that I really missed from it. So if they hadn't seen lots of other stuff, that might be the connection that really helped them too. And if they're big Amy Schumer fans, that probably helps them too.
I mean, and whenever somebody loves a movie that I hated or didn't like,
Right.
I'm always legitimately happy for them.
Right.
Because it's like, well, good. You got what you
got
wanted.
your money's worth.
I don't always have to pay. So if I don't pay and I hate something, it's like, let's just, it was
Right.
quiet, it was comfortable, and, it got me out of the house for a while. So that's all that we have to discuss that we personally saw in theaters this weekend.
That's true.
Up next is that which is available on home video on the platform, device, or format of your choice. First up is a film that I would be so overjoyed if you would introduce
I'll be
for us.
happy to. Speaking of getting out of the house, Willem Dafoe and Matt Damon get way out of the house. There are a couple of European guys who are off looking for gunpowder. Long ago, not necessarily, at least in lands far, far away. Where are you going to find gunpowder? You're going to find it in China. So they're sailing all over to check out and get some of that black gold, not the liquid kind. And all of a sudden, they find that they're going to have to help all of their buddies over there defend against big CG giant dragons and everything, because some things are going to try to tear down the Great Wall.
Build that wall! Build that wall! Build that wall! Build that wall!
Oof. So this is based on a true story?
Yes, absolutely. But they lost it all got burned up, all the documents. So this is silly. What can you really expect? When I first saw the trailers in the theaters, before I saw it at the movie theater, I didn't know it was all about dragons trying to attack and everything like that. I'm like, what a strange thing for Matt Damon to be in. So this is just kind of a silly action flick. If you go into it, checking your brain at the door, particularly if you like Damon and Willem Dafoe. Dafoe's a wonderful supporting character in one of my favorite movies of all time, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Got nominated for that, and he was wonderful in that. People probably know him better as the Green Goblin. This is a strange one. I'm kind of hemming and hawing because I sort of liked it, but it's just bizarre that dragons are attacking the Great Wall.
It's a fantasy action film.
Yeah, pretty much. The battles are kind of interesting. You don't see the dragons a whole lot until the end, so it's kind of mysterious. So there's effects, there's stuff blowing up all over the place. It really is, from the trailer, what you see is what you get. One of my favorite Damon movies? No, certainly not. But, for $5, if you're renting it, if you're downloading it or whatever, I think it's worth a watch.
This brings up, we have time. This brings up something that's interesting that not everybody may know about unless you read, trade info or stuff like that. China is a huge market for Hollywood. Now,
yes, yeah.
You will, if you pay attention, you will often see Chinese characters or films for some reason go to China a little bit in their story. Like the last Transformers, I believe, a chunk of it was set in China. And there was an Iron Man movie where there were actually additional scenes shot for the Chinese market. So films can tank here and do really well over there. So a lot of Hollywood is courting over there, and I think the back and forth relationship is when you get movies like this, which I pretty much believe was made by it was a Chinese filmmaker, which may have been Zhang Yimou.
More than half the actors are Chinese.
Yeah, so you get these co-productions like you used to get in the old days, where it's some well-known Chinese stars for their market plus big-name Hollywood stars. So it's like, ooh, we have Hollywood stars in one of our movies, and the Hollywood stars in turn allowed that film to play in this country. Although this didn't really get much of a release theatrically here. But it's always interesting for me to watch when a film, for some reason just has a Chinese guy in it who maybe is known. Like, hey, Donnie Yen's showing up in a lot of movies now. I wonder why. Not that that's a bad thing. I think it's fantastic that Donnie Yen is being in movies here. But it's interesting. It is a financial decision as much as creative as to why.
As you know, that's what Hollywood's all about.
Oh yeah. I always say if somebody's like, oh, that was crap, and I'm like, it's not about being good. It's about
making the green.
Up next, speaking of films that were in theatrical release once, I saw it that way. Funny enough, one of the few, the people who saw this movie in theater. We have a film that is most certainly inspired by a certain film or 10 from the 80s. What you gonna do when you are holed up in a small town hospital and strange robed figures are surrounding your edifice while inside a strange slithery creature is just going monkey nuts? Well, you hope that you do not fall into the void.
Duh.
That's a cheery thought.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a film that is clearly inspired by horror films of the 80s.
Yes,
including, shall we list them? We were doing it off the air. We're having fun. Right. It's Carpenter's The Thing.
Carpenter's Prince of Darkness.
Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13.
Yep.
Hellraiser. There's some Cronenberg in there.
Oh yeah.
It's got a synth score. Now I knew that going in, and I was a little nervous. I'm like, oh, this is just going to be a hodgepodge of things I've already seen. To a degree, yes, but it was more in the vibe and the broad strokes than it was in specifics. Like I just thought it was going to be a knockoff of The Thing, flat out.
Okay.
And there's more going on than that.
Yeah.
Like what this weird creature thing is and why it's there and who those cloaked figures are. It all comes together in the end, and I'm like, well, that's not The Thing. That's kind of different. That's kind of Hellraiser, but it's kind of some other things. But overall, just paying attention to the movie as it was unfolding, I was with it. You had sent me a message yesterday as you were watching it, and you're like, I'm 10 minutes in, does it get any better? And I'm like, give it another 10 minutes and it'll settle into whatever it's going to be. I couldn't remember. And I think I was the same way. Like at the beginning, I'm like, what is this? Where is this going to go? But once it started going, it is almost entirely practical effects, which is rare these days. They're very ornate and gruesome and imaginative. I say imaginative. Somebody obviously saw The Thing,
right?
But it's not just a guy in a rubber suit. It's pretty ornate and gruesome. So I liked it while I watched it. It's not necessarily anything I would watch again because honestly, it makes me think of other movies that are better that I'd rather watch.
Right.
It's like we made a list that we just made. I would watch this movie. I would think of that list, and I would watch all of those movies again probably before I would watch this. But if you're looking for a new film that's a throwback, if you haven't seen those other movies, or you just want something that's gruesome and kind of weird, I think The Void is pretty good for that.
I can agree with that. I was left with with a slightly less favorable opinion of it. You're right that after I texted you, the moment you responded, a certain event happens that was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll keep watching.
A certain extremely violent,
yes, extremely gruesome, violent event, and it continues that way. So as we're talking about it, taking all of these snippets from other movies, it mishmashed them around enough that it didn't feel like any one of those. You're right, I kept getting vibes from other ones, but it was fresh enough. Some of it felt a little forced. I felt in the long run that, I mean, performances were okay, that this was a movie from, and I don't know how many other films the people who made this, particularly the director and writer, have done, but it felt to me like two levels, and this is going to sound more negative than I mean it to be, kind of an early work that they didn't really have their chops yet, and another couple of movies under their belt, they're going to be better at this. And also that I felt that they needed a little bit higher budget. Now, some of the stuff toward the end that reminded me of The Prince of Darkness and things like that were pretty effective, but they're all done in a void. I kind of felt like the reason it's a void is because they didn't have enough of a budget, and that might very well be the case. But I felt like to really work the way this film wanted to work, it needed an extra $1 million or something like that. But for what they did, and in retrospect, you're right that I was kind of down on it at the beginning, and it built up a little bit. In retrospect, I think if you're a fan of any of those movies that we talked about, this is a bit of a fresh look at it. And I think I might actually, believe it or not, go back and rewatch this just to maybe appreciate it a little bit more. So ultimately, I thought The Void was pretty effective for what it wanted to be.
Now, there were no animals harmed in the making of this film,
we have to
recall.
Yes.
But I believe the next film, see, I try to tie them together. I believe the next film does involve animals.
It does, as a matter of fact. A young guy who was a street musician, unfortunately hooked on heroin in modern-day London, has a tough time getting through. He really wants to get better. He's hooked on methadone now. What's he going to do? Well, he doesn't really know until his life gets much better when he meets a street cat named Bob.
Tell your children not to hear my words, what they mean, what they say.
So I had never not heard of this, and I kind of grabbed it just to kind of flesh out some of the stuff that we were looking at. It's been years since I've found something that I like to champion. This is my favorite movie of the year. Again, based on a true story, performances are terrific. It's a little bit sappy. Just a couple of moments. And I didn't know it was based on a true story until the end of the film. So in retrospect, I have to kind of think it's based on a really popular book, apparently. And here's the amazing thing. If any of you ends up watching this, that's the actual cat that the street musician in London found. And I'm watching the movie thinking, boy, this cat is really well trained. How did they get this cat to high five? How did they get this cat to give that expression? And that's the actual cat. So I fell in love with this story for the first 10 minutes or so. And again, Luke Treadwell is the actor who plays the street musician. And I'm thinking initially, he's a guy hooked on heroin. How sympathetic can he be? The first 10 minutes or so, he is so endearing, and his performance is so heartfelt. I was almost brought to tears a couple of times to see the depths to which he has fallen in trying to get back. And there's some moments where his dad gives him some money, and he doesn't eat for a week so that he can take the cat to the vet. For animal lovers, particularly for cat lovers, I just thought this was wonderful. This is my favorite movie of the year.
And it doesn't have an Old Yeller ending because you've just spilled that it's the cat in the movie.
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah. Whoops, sorry about that.
You're right. No, that's a good thing.
That was what I was halfway through.
Because any animal movie.
Minor spoiler alert. I'm sitting there going halfway through saying, I'm going to really hate this movie if this cat dies, or if this cat is hurt or something like that. So no, that doesn't happen.
So that's a good thing.
I can't say it. I can't call it Disney-esque because it's about a guy hooked on heroin and overcoming methadone. But it has a happy ending.
Disney After Dark. Cool. I had never heard of that until you mentioned it yesterday, so that's nice. Okay. That's something we like to do when we can, is discover these little gems and let other folks know about them, because boy howdy is there a lot out there to wade through. You should see my house physically. So now a film, speaking of animals,
Yes.
that feast on other animals that were once almost human. What happens when a woman's car has a defective moment in the desert and she wakes up to find the world surrounded by zombies? The world surrounded? Sure, why not? She finds living life is difficult when there are undead surrounding you in the breakdown lane.
Ever switched to AAA insurance? He may not have been offered a ride to his world-famous battle.
Ooh, fun for the whole...
Exactly. Isn't it, though?
For the whole Manson family.
That's a Disney movie, right? Yeah.
Well, it's Disney After Dark. New imprint.
Disney After Dark.
They're bringing back Touchstone, and they're going dark with it. So this was a film, indie horror film.
Okay.
Maybe horror comedy at times, mostly horror film. And so yeah, basically it's a girl who's driving through the desert, and her car breaks down, and she's stranded, and she's talking to the OnStar guy for help and all that, and develops a friendly relationship with the OnStar guy, and then suddenly realizes that the world is overrun by zombies. Overnight, apparently. Now maybe it was a slow build, but I didn't like this.
The world is? Does
Or
the
at least-
OnStar guy know it?
Well, yes, ultimately.
That's kind of that might be kind of interesting.
So she's in the desert, and she's trying to make her way and get somewhere in time. Just get somewhere safe, and she comes across. Basically, there's no sense of what the timeline in this film is. It doesn't. I feel like it's been very much like maybe a day or two since this apocalypse has happened.
Okay.
And in some zombie movies, you see that it's a slow thing. You hear it builds until our characters realize, wow, this is kind of widespread. But in this, it seems like it's just boom, the world's gone crazy overnight. It's suddenly Road Warrior world overnight. Like there are all these bands of people who are dressing weird and talking funny, and I'm like, this happened awfully quickly. Technically, it's really pretty weak. I mean, it's a low-budget movie, so you'd be impressed if they got it made and finished. But a lot of times, like the foreground objects out of focus when it shouldn't be, or the brights are blown out, or bad shaky camera work. A lot of the zombie acting is bad. People overacting as zombies or acting poorly as zombies.
Right.
A lot of the supporting cast is bad. They do the crappy CGI blood, which looks cartoony and fake, and it gets on the lens, and I hate that because, hey, who's holding that camera that you just alerted me to? And they do these weird comic booky scene transitions where they're trying to make it feel like a comic book, but they seem really out of place. I really didn't like Breakdown Lane at all. It's not very long. It was mercifully only about 70-something minutes, but I would try to find a silver lining in everything. Maybe this is for people who want to watch every zombie movie ever made.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would pass Breakdown Lane. Give it a pass.
I get it. Well,
Quickly.
maybe you'll like something, another, not post-apocalyptic, but end of the world potentially kind of thing from our friends at Arrow.
Woo.
We
Are
talk
you
about
saying
Arrow.
it's the Arrow Video Corner?
It's the Arrow Video Corner. See, right there, wherever it might be. I may be dyslexic. Sorry for those of you who are. I'm not making fun of you, but I can't quite be sure where I'm pointing. But from Arrow, our friends there who go back and redo everything to just masterful, unbelievable quality. You're going to find something from the 50s, I believe, about some archaeologists are down in Mayan country trying to figure out where'd all the Mayans go? Didn't we kind of wonder that? They come up with a great calendar and a great civilization, and they're gone. Well, they may have found out deep down in a well someplace. They may have found out where it might be. You better be careful looking around in those caves, because that cave may be inhabited by Kaltiki, the immortal monster.
Basically what the water is, it's from a spring, and it makes you completely immortal.
You know, to be honest, it is Kaltiki, il mostro immortale, because this is Italian.
This is indeed. It was the first Italian monster movie made in the 50s. Made with an eye for international sales, like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So you had some people speaking English on the set, I believe, phonetically.
Okay.
This Arrow Blu-ray, okay, we always have to there should be like this little disclaimer we run before we do an Arrow thing. It's the best the film's ever looked.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks great, crisp,
I love black and white. You know, my students shoot black and white, and I just love it. And it was just a dream to watch.
It was shot by Mario Bava. It's special effects by Mario Bava, if that name means anything. And really impressive effects. And if you have an eye for it, like the foreground miniatures and the matte paintings, and there's some the extras on this are voluminous, and in the two commentaries they get into that, and the camera trickery. It's so impressive what they did with spit and twine. So little to work with, and it's effective on screen. The story is interesting. It's a mix of like a curse film and a blob,
Yeah, clearly the blob,
and a
right.
possession kind of thing, and it's not very long. It held my interest throughout. I really had a good time with this, and I'd never seen this before.
Okay.
I'd only ever heard of it. You have a commentary by Tim Lucas, who's Bava's biographer, who wrote a gigantic and definitive biography. You have another commentary by Troy Howarth, I believe, who also wrote a book on Bava. You've got extras on the film. You've got the trailer. You've got what they call archival extras, which were just prepared for an earlier, I think, Italian release of the film. So there's a lot of really good context for the film once you watch it, which I had a lot of fun delving into all of that because it was so much fun. But I think if you like 50s monster movies, you might not know this one. There is Italian language or English language option, whichever you prefer.
Right.
I think each of us watched it a different way.
Yes.
So
yeah.
if you're not into the subtitles thing, you don't have to worry about that. But I really had a good time with Kaltiki. It took me back to Saturday afternoon creature double feature of my youth.
Right. Again, what I was most impressed with was the transfer and the loving attention that they pay to this black and white image, which I just love. I was struck a little bit. I was not quite as fond as you were of it. I certainly liked this, and I think anybody who's a monster movie fan, a historian, anything like that would enjoy watching this. I was struck a little bit by, and I guess I probably have to say in retrospect, because this was what, early 50s? I'm not quite sure, because The Blob was 56, as I recall. So I'm not sure if this was before it or not.
I think it was after.
But, okay, so, I mean, it felt a little derivative and kind of similar to The Void. And again, this is 60 years old, 70 years old. Some of the sets and the way it was lit was a little dark, and I felt it was dark because they were hiding something. Just didn't want to show some of this stuff. But that's being really, really critical of a film that overall held up really well. I watched the English dub, and as you say, when you click watch the English dub,
I thought it was kind of funny.
It says, "Oh, do you really want to do this? It may really suck," or I forget exactly what it said. But I thought it was really pretty effective and worked pretty well. My son and I watched the subtitled, the English subtitled version for like the first 5 minutes, and he even noticed that the subtitled version didn't match up with the English dub, so they were saying different things, little different backstory and stuff. But in the long run, I think people who don't want to watch the subtitled version, the English version was transferred perfectly well, and I thought this held up with, the original thing, any of the early 50s monsters movie. I thought it was loads of fun and looked great again.
Perhaps it will now get its due.
We can only hope.
It may not have before. Speaking of Arrow Video, we stay in the naughty corner. It's not the naughty corner, it's the Arrow Video corner, don't you know? Sometimes it's naughty, but most of the time it's just weird. We have a film, an Italian film starring Terence Hill, who you may or may not know from Super Fuzz, a personal favorite of ours. I get the poster in my office thanks to this guy. And he stars as, should I say it? I can't say it until it's time for the title. Prince of the Pistoliers is, his wife is killed by an ambush by a bad governmental guy, and he rounds up a bunch of deceased outlaws to take revenge in Django, Prepare a Coffin.
We're open 7 days a week to help you make a purchase of a casket.
Kaboom.
Peace through superior firepower. So this is one of many films with the word Django in the title. There was a film a year or two earlier than this called Django, which starred Franco Nero, and it was Italian spaghetti western. It was incredibly popular in Italy, so it spawned a couple of actual sequels. I think Franco Nero was only ever in 2.
No, it's Italian.
Yes.
But like the Nero one, is it based in America or is it based in Italy? And
I believe this always confuses me. I love spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
They're always supposed to be the American Southwest.
Right.
But in my head, they're always in Europe, just
Right.
because I know that's
I
where
agree.
they came from.
Right.
And then once in a while, they'll mention Dodge City or something. Like, oh yeah, this is supposed to. To me, they're in some Twilight Zone. They're in some fifth dimension in their beautiful balloon. And so you had multiple people starring in Django films. There's an extra on this Blu-ray that talks about that, and I think it's very funny because I'm amused by old-time ballyhoo and exploitation and hucksterism. There would be films with the word Django in the title where there was no character named Django in the film. It was just because it was box office, it had currency in the box office, shall we say. So this is Terence Hill, who went on to be paired with Bud Spencer in a lot of comedy westerns and the Trinity films and My Name is Nobody and a lot of really great stuff. Super Fuzz. And it's interesting because he's serious in this film. He's he's mostly known for lighter roles, but
Right.
this is serious. And as I said, he's a guy he's riding his wagon along a mountain pass, and bad guys show up and ambush him to, I think, get some gold that he's carrying, and his wife winds up being killed. And I believe he is thought dead. He then poses as a hangman and goes around and doesn't really hang a bunch of criminals. I think he makes a deal with them ahead of time and puts a harness so they're not really hung, and then collects the bodies and basically says, okay, you're with me now, and he forms a gang of dead men, and they go in to take revenge on the bad guys. It's just a fun revenge movie. There's not a lot of weight to it. It's just funny. Funny in terms of, I always like spaghetti westerns because they have a cool, unique soundtrack. They often have a string of perversity running through it in the villains, or something is weird. People have weird weapons, and they're always stylishly done. So this has all that, which made me happy. Again, being an Arrow movie, it looks great. You have your choice of Italian language or English language. You have copious extras that delve into the people who made these movies. The interview, I think, with producer or screenwriter, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there's an audio commentary on this one. And just a good amount of context, which I recommend watching after the movie, because they usually have scenes throughout the movie in these extras.
Right, yeah.
But I really enjoyed it a lot. I'm a sucker for spaghetti westerns, and I was happy to see one with Terrence Hill, who I like.
Cool. Good.
So that's all we have to cover this week. Was there anything else you would like to discuss cinemaniacally?
No, just once again, I want to thank and greet our new sponsors over there in Brattleboro. So, nope, not really.
Oh, and that's Brattleboro, Vermont, as opposed
yes.
to Brattleboro, Indiana, should you be watching in the Midwest and being like, oh, I got to get over there.
Got to get over there to the Latches and see that. Nope.
Yeah, it's a longer drive. So next week we have the new Alien film.
Yep, think that's going to be pretty big.
The one movie closer to the film entitled Alien film.
Right. Well, it's actually, I think from what it looks like, it's the prequel actually to Alien. It's about all of those colonists.
Yes.
Because if you remember Alien, the people arrive and they find out that the previous colony had been just disappeared. I think it's, my understanding is it's that story.
You had Prometheus, which was sort of the beginning,
right,
so to
the
speak.
very, very beginning.
This is the next chapter.
Right, I think so.
Maybe if it's really popular, I'm sure we'll squeeze another,
Right,
wedge
exactly,
another one in there.
The Tuesday after.
Parallel, or a prequel to the prequel, or
Right.
wherever there's, however much flour is left in that sack, you can keep shaking. And the new Diary of a Wimpy Kid film, which I feel like they've recast the main role now.
Probably. Well, I mean, he's probably got to be 10 years older now, I would think. Something like that. So
I'm not really a fan of those films, but something on the poster was something like a new hero will rise. So I think they're trying to be insinuating that this is, he looks different, but he's the same character.
Okay.
And that may be all theatrically we have to talk about.
I think probably pretty much, yeah. It's a little slow, with Guardians still out there. And an Alien kind of. I don't think anybody wants to go up against either of those two.
You have the opposite sides of the pendulum. You have Alien with visceral, gut-munching horror, and then you have a wimpy kid.
Right.
So the parents go to one, the kid go to the other.
Well, Ridley Scott seems to be revisiting a lot of his old movies with Alien, and then October 6th, Blade Runner.
It's like a victory lap of his old haunts.
Yes.
So until then, we will let you watch some films, which we highly recommend you do. And until then, I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.